you. And for those who are able to join us later, I hope that you are able to have some really exciting conversations and meet some really wonderful people. This session is something that the BRIC team and many of our partners had a lot of conversations about adding the A and really looking at DEIA and what that means to add accessibility and making sure that that's something that we all focus on. So we wanted to create a space to really talk about all the ways in which accessibility not only helps our workforce but helps ourselves. So today we have a really great fireside chat. We have Kaya Amara right here. We have Shay Mirzai, and we have Andrea Levant. I will let them get into this conversation, but please give them a very warm welcome.
Cool. Well, my name was said first, so I guess I'll start. My name's Kaya Amara. My pronouns are they and she. I run a production company. We also like to use Diana Elizabeth Jordan's word, which is an edutainment company. We're a production company that does a lot of studio education, trainings for production companies for specific projects, as well as our own work, which is all queer, TGNC, disability focused. All of those things at once, not each separated out into its own space.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll go now because my name was read right after Kaya's. Hi, everybody. I'm Shay Mirzai. I'm a film and TV writer. I also happen to be a person who stutters. And for anyone in the audience with a visual impairment, I am I'm wearing a black blazer, a blue shirt, and I have a big beard that I desperately have to do something with. I also happen to be the founder and CEO of my own film and TV company called Space Coyote. And I am the co-chair of the WGA's Disabled Writers Committee. And thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Levant. I use she, her pronouns for visual description. I'm a brown-skinned woman with, what color am I here today? Black, blue, and gray locks, purple glasses, wearing a gray hat, and a variety of colors dress. And this is Goji down on the floor, if you see her moving around. I am President and Chief Inclusion Consultant for Levant Consulting. We are a strategy and communications firm, disability focused, and our mission, we say, is to shape the way the world reaches, views, and values disabled people. We do that with a lens that acknowledges that disability is not a monolith. That means that we see that from a very intersectional viewpoint, and that's kind of how we work with our clients across industries, one of which is Netflix. So we're excited to be here today.
Cool. All right. I'm going to jump in just because of things that we chatted about before. Again, this is a fireside chat, so we're all just kind of going to chat with one another. But one of the things we started with talking about is like just the concept itself of adding the A. And we have talked a lot today about, DEI, and then DEI became DEIA, and then that became IDEA because that sounded better, and then it became DEIA, and now there's a B. And that sometimes it can be really challenging when we get to this space of adding, and what feels like an afterthought. When especially because disability is so intersectional, the most intersectional community that there can be, they're always going to be disabled and other things, that instead of thinking about the framework of adding accessibility in as an afterthought is most often when, it's not done the way that it should be done. And it's not only inauthentic, it's more expensive, it's potentially harmful to people in the disability community. So thinking about it, as something that you're building in from the ground up And then in Indivisible, we always use this as well. And I think this is sort of a nice framework to kick off the final conversation of a long day, which is simplify. Instead of trying to remember, all the letters for all the things, especially again, disability, there's a huge community of disabled folks. We're all different disabled folks. There's different disabled folks in this space. But instead of thinking about, specific rules or things that may need to go in there, those are the things that you should hire disabled people for, creatives and consultants and all of that. Thinking about the framework of accessibility is just a state of easy engagement, and that accommodation is just the flexibility that you're using to get there. So instead of thinking of accommodation as like a super complicated legal idea, which it also is, but again, you don't have to be, an expert in that because other people are. For the sake of, your company for entertainment, thinking of accessibility just as a state of easy engagement and accommodation as what you're using to get there, I think is a nice way to just start about chatting.
Yes. That's, wow. No, I was going to say, I agree. We were having the whole conversation around accessibility as a separate, recognizing that if we're talking about inclusion, then accessibility should be a part of, including, right? And when we go backwards with that E and D, that does need to be a part of it, which is huge. And I know in the work that we do, often when people come solely talking about accessibility without thinking about those other aspects, it is at that place of compliance. What do we need to do to check the box? What do we need to do so we don't get sued? What do we need to do so that I don't, screw up, say something wrong, right? And we're in I say all the time, like 2023, we're over 30 years past the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Which was, at a baseline of like equal rights, which goodness knows we're not there yet. And yet at the same time, we need to be moving past that conversation around compliance and just access. What do we need to do to get a person in the building? But often when we look at disability, particularly from a place of intersectionality, the three of us, as you mentioned, we all look different. We're going to enter the room differently. So as the Black woman on this panel, right, like the obvious thing is that. And so we all could be wheelchair users, right? But when we get into the building, it's not just the access that gets us into the building, it's how I, as a Black woman, Black disabled woman, am going to be treated or interacted with, how you will, how Shay, you know what I mean? And so that's why the bringing it all together is so important in conversations like these.
Yeah, and I think that is a really fantastic point because, again, like while we all may look very different, I myself am a gay first generation Iranian American. I think that leads us to a really cool space that we're now in, what I'd like to call an age of specificity. And like while we're here and speaking on the importance of things like improving accessibility and how there is a lot of work to be done, I do think that we should see exactly how far we've come. Because while I've been a full-time WGA member and screenwriter for the past 8 years, the first part of my career, which began like at the end of like 08. I spent 6 years as a head of the story department at a mini major studio. And back when I first got started, stories like these would never even be given a second look, because it just wasn't where we were at the time. So in the past 4, 5, or 6 years ago. So we really have come a long way in reshaping the whole way that our business finds and makes stories. So, like, I'll speak to my own experience. I have I have a feature rom-com that I have set up at BuzzFeed Studios. It's called Speak, and it's all about a person who stutters. Back when I was reading scripts, we wouldn't have even seen a story like that be sent out across town. So now we not only have a very cool filmmaker who's circling now, but like we're shortly going to go out to money people and financiers. So like it really speaks to like exactly how far we've come. Where I not only was able to like hope that I'd be able to get a film like this made, but now it seems like it might actually be happening. So I think that's something we're all very excited about.
That's great. That's awesome.
Wow! Thank you for the applause.
I think we talked about as well that thing of being the only one in the room and also being multiple only things in the room. Andrea, just like you said, I didn't do a visual description of myself like you guys did, but I am white, which is important to mention even just for anybody who might only be listening. I have a non-white name, which is an experience in itself as a white person. But that we get very scared in the industry of telling a story that includes somebody has more than one identity.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, there's going to be a queer character. Okay, well then they have to be white and they have to be cis and they have to be non-disabled. But that's so not true of disability. And it's, you know, it's not true of a lot of identities that we're all in the space. Usually, you know, for Indivisible, we write stories where folks are queer and disabled and trans and people of color and all of these things at once. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind, both like within company business structure as well as in the projects that you're creating, you know, whether it's animation or live action, how you move forward into that space of, you know, we're not just including one thing, and as you said, accessibility has to be the doorway to all other kinds of inclusion, because if you can't get in the room, then it doesn't matter that somebody might want you to be there. If you can't go in, then you know you're stuck exactly where you are. That's so Indivisible. I work as a production accessibility coordinator, which is a relatively new role. But it's new in that the industry is just starting to recognize it. Disabled folks, again, especially, as we've mentioned before, queer, BIPOC, you know, disabled folks, that's where a lot of spaces are created because they're the people who can't get in the room. That work has been happening for a really long time. But what accessibility coordinators do, again, live action or animation, is make the space accessible. Make the space safe, all of those things that are trainings that are sort of general accessibility, all of the things that are specific to your exact project. All of that is part of the work of you know, a PAC, a production accessibility coordinator, in order to make sure that that authenticity can be in the room. I know we talked about this too. We had our lovely keynote speaker, and the whole time we had our interpreters working, I was thinking about another interpreter. His name is Jeremy Lee Stone. And Andrea, you guys just did a bunch of the accessibility for the Grammys, which I want you to talk about in just a sec. But Jeremy Lee Stone is an amazing, you know, person of color who's also deaf, who's also a poet as well. And I was like, wait. That's the art that we missed because that person wasn't in the room. And sometimes because you don't know how to find them, or you don't know where to find them, or you don't know how to find them quickly. But, you know, that's the art that you're missing out on. That's the person. That's the authentic story. And I was so excited. My brain just kept picturing JLS doing it.
Yeah, and I from a storytelling perspective, when we see it as opportunity, like and depth, right? Because we get excited as disabled people when we see representation of disability on the screen, and yet sometimes when I'm watching, some of the storylines we've seen, special others, and I'm like, that's a white mom. My black mama did not like, you know what I mean? That was not my experience, right? As a black disabled person, and to me, that's opportunity to tell a different story. And I think if we, again, are looking at it from less of a, uh-oh, what are we, how I'm too scared to touch this, or yeah, we need to tell one singular story, we're missing out on the depth of story.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic like space for me to add, where we are missing out on a bunch of these really cool different stories, because like I'll speak to my own past and experience again. Like back when I was starting out in the biz, so I was going after like the things that I can get, which were unpaid internships, and I had been told I wouldn't be able to be hired because I can't work the phones, which I'm happy to prove after about 14 years that I am able to work the phone. So I think it worked out okay. But like it speaks to a bigger notion that those who don't have disabilities may somehow have these expected and internal biases, like about how people like us aren't able to get like the work done, when in fact we have to work much harder. But we do have both the talent and the ability to do so, which also I think would be a really good place for me to mention that there's a handful of really cool groups out there who are working to change things. I see a few of my friends and colleagues from an organization called Respectability. I was lucky enough to be invited to be a mid-career mentor for them a few years ago. I've stayed in touch. They run wonderful boot camps and a bunch of cool groups and labs. They're having a new wave beginning soon. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to sign up. You can find more information at respectability.org. But I specifically mentioned that because back when I was coming up, you wouldn't see very cool places like this. And now we're making a big difference, and we're able to open up more pipelines for talent who would otherwise be absolutely shut out or told that they're not going to be able to work the phones.
I think, and if you don't mind, Kaya, that it just reminds me of, we say a lot when it comes to barriers, and people always, talk about barriers, particularly to inclusion, and it is that the attitudinal, the thoughts, the thinking, the stereotypes that are the first thing, I think that excludes us, right? It's those. And so a lot of the work that we do, typically the baseline where we start with companies is just around language. It's around, we talk about building trust through language, looking at, historically the models of disability, what have shaped the way that we see disability on television, how we interact with one another, the concept of ableism, and how racism plays into that. And again, then it plays out in our internalized selves, and then our interpersonal actions, and then ultimately, structurally out in the world. And so I think, just thinking, Shay, about what you're saying, that's really a big place where it starts, is that attitude.
We had another speaker mention today as well about how do we take people who are starting out in entry-level jobs and actually move those diverse people up into positions of power. And I feel like it's especially true for disabled people, for intersectional disabled people, and for folks who, the entry-level jobs weren't really designed for them. Because I've heard your exact story, especially from, deaf HOH folks, deaf hard of hearing folks who are like, they said I couldn't work the phones, so they won't let me enter, right? That's the accessibility is the doorway to everything. So I think respectability, as you said, Shay and I actually met through that respectability program. And I know BRIC as well on their website has a list of a bunch of other, organizations, and keeping in mind that disabled people are a part of Latinx in animation. Disabled people are a part of Women of Color Unite. Disabled people are a part of any other group that you can go to. Disabled people could be a part of that space as well. But that thinking about, okay, how are we taking things outside of the normal structure of entry positions? How are we opening that up for disabled folks to actually see, where that toolbox metaphor that we had before as well. Disabled people that's part of our cultural identity, is getting around things, coming up with creative solutions, being the person who knows how to look at it from another angle. And how are you offering people the opportunity to do that from the outset, instead of requiring them to answer the phones and run get your coffee and organize a schedule, which are not necessarily things that are accessible to everybody. So how could you create new positions in that space? I spoke earlier as well about Respectability's most recent lab, which was actually Netflix was a partner as well, and that Respectability's hoping to do again this year. But it was all about kids content, animation, all from authentic disabled creatives. The showcase that we had was entirely run by disabled crew. It's a full disabled space. But that one of the things that we did in that lab was that there was like a speed dating session that was about interviewing. But we basically had, pairs of folks meet with people from a whole bunch of different spaces within the 9-story family, and you give people the space to have a conversation, to tell you what they're great at, to tell you what their skills are. And again, especially this space of like, disabled folks sometimes have a doubly hard time in the industry, I feel like, because we're really good at telling people, this is my boundary, I'm not gonna do that, or I can't do that, or, this space needs to work a different way from me. And I think that that's scary for a lot of folks. And instead of having it be scary, it should be a thing that's really exciting, right? I think this industry needs more boundaries. But that should be a thing that's really exciting, to be able to have somebody who you can invite into your space who can say, this is exactly how I need this to work. Again, that respectability space. We had sensory friendly rooms, we had interpreters, we had captions, we had, things that recognize a bunch of intersections of disability as well. And I think that's, the more you can connect with those groups, the more you can connect with the authentic disabled people, is the more that you're breaking out of that cycle of misrepresentation that we've talked about as the thing that sort of creates a hazard for DEIA staying in place, is because we do representation that isn't actually any of the communities, and then everybody watches it and goes, well, that's not me, and I didn't want to see that. Doesn't mean I don't want to see disabled content. I absolutely do, but I want to see it from people like Shay, who's actually writing the real thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect point too, as well. And that I would want to maybe wrap up on this, like the fact that all three of us here are queer people as well. I want to get rid of like the internalized shame that many of us grow up with. Basically, through no fault of our own, it's the way that like society views and perceives people like us. I know, like, my life became much better when I was able to come out as a gay man, and then after that, so I was able to embrace being an openly disabled person. So I know that there's still a lot of stigma around that, but I truly believe that there is power in numbers, and with the fact that about 1 in 4 people in this country already have a disability, I think we should all start talking about it.
Agree. Yeah, I think that was when it came to like embracing of disability identity, because I grew up in a household, my dad is here somewhere, and we were very, Black pride, and, they went to HBCUs. And so I grew up in a household that was embracing of everything else. But because I didn't see myself, I saw, Claire Huxtable and Whitley Gilbert and Khadijah James and all of these folks that, yay, I'm Black, yay, I'm a woman, yay, I can, but I still didn't see, that aspect of, myself, the disability, and so there was still that disconnect from a place of pride. And I think that, again, when I talk about opportunity and even what you were saying, even, in evolution as a queer person, right, it's that. And when we see ourselves, we embrace ourselves, and so we need more of that in order to, it's the world that we're actually in. We say all the time, it's not just that 1 in 4 people are disabled in America. 1 in 4 Black people are disabled in America, 1 in 6 Latinx, 1 in 10 Asian, so there is within disability all of that, plus, so much more. So.
I was going to say, I think that's our time. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you, everyone.
We did it. We made it through the 2023 BRIC Summit.
Woo!